you spoke, but I will, let's touch base before. Yes.
I've got your email, so I'll send you an email.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Italo, I can stand on this.
Check, check, check. Yeah? We're ready to roll? No.
I can stand on this side and then walk over there. Sounds good?
Welcome back, everyone. How are your breakout groups? Give it like a whoop whoop. All right, we have an action-packed second half of our meeting today with just lots and lots of jam-packed with workers who've been on the front lines organizing their workplaces. When we kicked off earlier today, we talked a bit about how far people came. These people might get the award for coming the farthest, I'm not sure, but they're all the way here from Garner, North Carolina. And when they roll into the boss's office with these matching t-shirts, you know that the bosses are shook. So I am really, really proud to introduce Carolina Amazonians United for Solidarity and Empowerment. That's CAUSE. And as I said, they've been organizing an independent union in Garner, North Carolina at Amazon's RDU1 facility. They went head-to-head with the biggest union busters in the world, demanding $30 an hour, 180 hours paid time off, and more through their union drive. And they took that fight right to Andy Jassy and Jeff Bezos' doorstep. And because we know we're strongest when we work together, they all came up here on stage together, even though we're going to hear from their elected secretary, Italo Medino. So give it up for him.
Hello, everybody. Wow. It's amazing to be in Seattle, the capital of Amazon. So the other day, all of us were rolling up to Jeff Bezos' balls. I don't know if everybody knows where those are, the Spheres. The Spheres down in Seattle. So, as many of y'all may know, or you might, I don't know, we recently had an NLRB election at RDU1 in Gardner, North Carolina. Now, we lost that election, but we're still here. Typically, after unions, especially independent unions, we're not tied to any of the big unions. Everybody in here, we work inside of that warehouse. We pack the boxes that people get within 1 to 2 days. I work the ship dock. We are in that building every single day, and in the night, we organize our union. So typically when unions lose in history, we've seen that the bosses expect you to collapse. The bosses say, oh, we beat you this one time, it's over, now let's move on to the next one. A week after, we're in their capital. We're right in their face. At the end of our election, when the media was all up in our face and asking us, oh, what are you going to do now, expecting that we were just going to say, well, we tried and it's over, we said, we're going to do it again. And we're going to do it again and again and again. And if we lose, we're going to do it again and again until we win. That's pressure. The only way to defeat Amazon, one of the largest empires in the history of the world, is through on-the-ground worker power by shutting down their lines of production if necessary. By being in their face every single day. We're not taking a break. We might have lost this election, but in this last Christmas, we gave them a Christmas present, which was union authorization cards. They never thought we were going to be able to do it. We signed over 30% of that 5,000-person warehouse. We put them right before the NLRB. And we gave them that beautiful Christmas present of an election. What about this coming Christmas? Maybe we'll give them another one. And the Christmas after, maybe we'll give another one. And the Christmas after, maybe we'll give them another one. And if we win at RDU1, we'll go down the road to RDU5. If we win at RDU5, we'll go down the road to RDU2. until we unionize the entire state of North Carolina, the entire state of South Carolina, and you know what? Maybe all the way out to the Mississippi. And that's what we love about Workers Strike Back. That workers right now in 2025 are striking all the way back. We're not giving up when we have a tiny little loss. We're not giving up when we have a little adversity before us. And just like every other war, right? You can go all the way back to the Romans. Had a great loss in the Battle of Cannae. Everybody got destroyed. A few years later, they came back and won the war. Same thing with Washington. The Battle of New Jersey got destroyed, absolutely destroyed, came back and won the war. And that's exactly what we're here to do. We don't care about one battle. We're going to look at what we did right, we're going to look at what we did wrong, and we're going to come back stronger than ever, and we will win this war against Amazon. And I think, just to close, one of the things that a lot of people don't see on the outside of the Amazon labor movement is that we're kind of like an iceberg, right? With an iceberg, you can only see the little top of it, but it's huge at the bottom. For the last 3 years, we've been helping build a continental movement. We got friends all the way in LA, up here in Washington, New Jersey, Philadelphia, Mexico, Canada. We've been meeting as a continent of Amazon workers. And we are now together. It doesn't matter if you're Teamster, it doesn't matter if you're independent, it doesn't matter if you're ALU. We all support each other. And Amazon does not know what's coming to them. Because let me tell you something. Before the year 2030, you're going to see a mass movement of Amazon workers right here in Seattle taking the fight to Amazon headquarters. And we will get our contract no matter what Amazon wants. And that's why Workers Strike Back is so important, why we want to work alongside Sister Shama, who's been with us from the very beginning, why we want to work alongside everybody in this room, because we can't just do it alone from the warehouse floor. We also need our allies. We need to bring the war to Washington, D.C., to state legislatures. We need to bring the war all the way to the warehouse. And if we can unite and have this warehouse strategy, political strategy, outside strategy, all working in tandem, it's going to be over for the people in power. So thank you all so much for welcoming us. Thank you all so much for opening the doors of Amazon's capital. And we feel ready to keep this fight going for many, many years to come. And let me tell you something. Together, we will win. Thank you very much. Nobody else wants to talk, I guess. Juno, you want to say something?
Hello, I'm Juno Rondelli. I'm from Raleigh, North Carolina. And I'll tell you all one thing. I'll keep it a lot shorter than Brother Idolo's speech over here. What Amazon is trying to do is divide us. Amazon's trying to put the young against the old, the black against the white, the queer against the straight. Hell, they'll put you against each other if you have brown or blonde hair. They want to keep us divided on all these meaningless things. But you see, we ain't going to be divided on those things because there's only one true division. It's those who have and those who have not. And I certainly don't have a lot. And certainly the folks in Garner don't have a lot either. I work in what is called inbound. I work in decant. I'm a night worker. And let me tell you, I have seen and talked with people who have passed out on the floor because there is no heat protection in there. I have actually been hit over the head with a tote trying to clear a jam that they did not train you to clear. And that totes can have up to 50 pounds of items in them coming down a conveyor belt. I have seen people get their hands stuck in rolling conveyor belts and get jams and have to go to the hospital. I have talked with pregnant mothers, 7 to 8 months pregnant, who are denied their maternity leave and have to fight with HR as they're working on the floor without any disability. You see, sometimes the best organizer is your boss. Because they fuck around, and we're going to find out soon enough. We, the workers of Garner, and the workers of the world, we have this power. And we are going to unite, and ultimately, we're the workers. We're in the community. We're out on the shop floor. Who are these union busters out here? Get paid thousands to come down from Seattle, Ohio, Detroit. They don't know us, and they aren't us. So we're going to build back strong. We're going to come together. We're already here together as a family here today. And we're going to win this thing. Because, you know, that's all we can do. Because an injury to one is an injury to all. And we will build and we will win. Not only in North Carolina, but across this great nation. Thank you.
In Workers Strike Back, we have a saying that I'd like to send you guys off with, and it goes a little something like this. When we fight, when we fight, when we fight, and you will. I also wanted to announce that all across the country over the last few weeks, Workers Strike Back members have been out tabling, and we have stopped people, whether they're in Garner, North Carolina, or Boston, or Maine, and we've said, do you want to help unionize Amazon? And hundreds of them have said, yes, of course. I hate Jeff Bezos. And we have raised $1,226 that we will be donating to cause to help them continue their fight against Jeff Bezos. And my co-chair, Margaret, is going to introduce our next worker activist speaker.
Thank you so much. I was really impressed with that speech from the Amazon workers. And of course, their organizing efforts are ones that we can all take lessons from. My introduction here will be pretty quick. I'm going to introduce a rank and file member of the United Auto Workers, Justin Smeltzer from Peoria, Illinois. He brought forward a resolution in his local calling for an end to all military aid to the Israeli state and calling to unendorse Kamala Harris for her pro-war position. And he is a member of Workers Strike Back.
Thank you. My name is Justin Smeltzer, and I'm a member of UAW Local 974, and I work as an industrial electrician at Caterpillar in Peoria, Illinois, or Central Illinois. I joined Workers Strike Back when I came across it about a year ago. The organization and people involved in it stood out to me as an organization that can make real lasting change. The fighting spirit that I saw in Workers Strike Back led me to getting involved and taking up a task that Workers Strike Back was working on to organize rank and file workers in unions to pass resolutions in their unions to rescind the undemocratic endorsement of Kamala Harris by union leaderships around the country. I fought for this demand, and I had a shop floor conversations with my fellow coworkers to point out the hypocritical nature of the union leadership's undemocratic endorsement of Harris, which was done without discussion or vote by the members of UAW. Sorry. Harris was backing the genocide in Gaza to the hilt, which UAW rank and file firmly opposed. This opposition among the rank and file led to President Shawn Fain, the UAW International, calling for an arms embargo. But Shawn Fain turned around and uncritically endorsed Biden and then Harris without any democratic vote by membership of UAW. We faced total opposition from our union leadership when we brought this resolution forward to the local and was unable to pass in UAW. But it was a vital tool for talking to my coworkers and including coworkers who did agree on these points, but they told me that they would be supporting Trump. This is a perfect illustration of how the attacks by Democrats have led to the election of Trump. And I've recently worked alongside other members of Workers Strike Back to draft a model resolution that calls for labor leaders and unions to organize national days of action, including mass protest and strike action to stop mass deportations. I've been organizing for this resolution to pass through UAW, and I have successfully gotten a resolution passed at the January membership meeting of the UAW Reform Caucus, Unite All Workers for Democracy, or UAWD. And this resolution calls on the rank and file workers across UAW and other unions to bring the similar resolution to their locals and demand that the labor leaders stand on the principle that an injury to one is an injury to all. I'm deeply disturbed that we have heard nothing from UAW leaders about Trump's mass deportations and his other anti-worker policies. UAW leadership has also been silent on the rising layoffs in the auto industry over the past few years, and it does not seem to be slowing down anytime soon. During the presidential campaigns, Shawn Fain called Trump a scab and told workers to vote for Harris, despite Biden and Harris administration's role in breaking the railroad worker strike. But now he's shamefully said he'll work with Trump. Shawn Fain has built some credit among a section of UAW members because he won them a wage increase in 2023 when he carried out the stand-up strike at the Big Three automakers. However, the method of the stand-up strike, which consists of some factories going on strike while others continue production, left open major factories at the Big Three that produce the most popular vehicles, which could have been won by the Big Three strike if all workers had been out on strike at every factory and they all went on strike at once, shutting down the boss's profits. In fact, several workers' demands, including the shortening of the work week from 30 hours of work to 40 hours of pay, was left off the final agreement, and due to the strategy employed by the union leadership and not applying the full pressure of all workers going out on strike. These examples of the stand-up strike and the response to Gaza and deportations are rotten method of labor leadership that we refer to as business unionism, where labor leaders will claim to fight for workers while simultaneously wanting to not hurt the boss's profits, Democrats' chances to win elections. This ultimately helps the ruling class and is bad for working class people and workers because their interests are diametrically opposed to the interests of the bosses. For this reason, the labor movement's rank and file needs to expose the failures of the leadership and organize mass pressure on the labor leaders to fight Trump, the Democrats, and the bosses. We need to be organizing independent mass strike action, mass protests, and mass civil disobedience if we intend to be an effective fight back to win. This independent organizing should be intimately linked with the building of a new independent working class party led by the rank and file of the union, demanding the union leadership break from the Democrats and other capitalist parties and form this new working class party. One that is accountable to the workers themselves and not corporations that our unions are designed to fight against. I call on each of you to join Workers Strike Back and get involved because we need you in the fight. We need a militant rank and file workers movement to take the reins back from the rotten approach of conservative labor leaders as we workers are exploited for our labor by the capitalists, and we need to organize to shut down the profits that cause an extreme disruption to their system to win our demands. And when we fight, we can win.
Thank you very much. That was a fantastic speech. I'd like to welcome next to the stage Gray Martin, who is a Harborview healthcare worker. They recently spoke to the 3,000-person rally that turned out in solidarity with federal workers facing major attacks from Trump and Elon Musk. And they are a member of Workers Strike Back as well. Thank you.
My name is Gray Martin. I am a healthcare worker and a rank-and-file member of Washington Federal State Employees Union Local 3488. The billionaire in the White House, Donald Trump, along with Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, are currently carrying out an anti-worker blitz across the federal government. Roughly 75,000 federal workers have taken a buyout that Trump and Musk have offered to get them to leave against the advice of our unions, and over 10,000 federal workers have already been fired by this administration. This equals about 3% of the 2.3 million person civilian workforce. Trump and Musk cuts to government agencies and programs aren't about targeting fraud or waste. It's an attack on workers and our meager protections, including cuts at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Hospitals and trauma centers like my own are largely funded through Medicare and Medicaid, which provides necessary health care for millions of Americans. These cuts are making the already barbaric healthcare system in this country even worse. Meanwhile, the Democrats have done nothing to fight back. In fact, many of them have joined in on Trump's attacks. This is after Democrats paved the way for Trump's victory in the first place with their betrayals and attacks on working people. Democrats broke the railroad workers' strike. They failed to fight for a $15 minimum wage. They've refused to fight for Medicare for all. And they spent billions to fund the genocide in Gaza. It's that endless barrage of attacks and betrayals that has brought us to this point. Workers keep the economy and government running, not the billionaire class, which exploits our labor to make their profit. Workers' power lies in being organized, willing to strike and to withhold our labor. The threat of strike action is our most important weapon to force these billionaire-backed parties and wealthy elite to act and to secure victories for the working class. In 2019, during Trump's government shutdown, unionized air traffic controllers and flight attendants threatened strike action that forced Trump to end the shutdown within hours of the strike being called. Federal workers can stop Trump's anti-worker attacks and fight for more, including real raises to make up for years of massive inflation. We need to go on the offensive with a fighting strategy for what workers need, including a renewed fight for Medicare for all, including ballot initiatives for public health care at the local and state level. And we cannot rely on the failed strategy of the vast majority of the union leadership who endorsed the strikebreakers Joe Biden and then Kamala Harris. We have to rebuild a fighting labor movement, which means rejecting the approach of the business unionist leaders, including the heads of the federal government unions like my union, AFSCME, who have failed to organize strike action in response to Trump's attacks. We need a class struggle approach, and that requires reckoning inside the labor movement and the building up of a new, militant, rank-and-file leadership, including a socialist leadership that understands that we need to break with capitalism itself. Coordinated mass strike action led by the rank and file is needed that can disrupt business as usual. It will require support from the rest of the labor movement and all working people independent of either major political party. We must take lessons from history in order to move forward. It wasn't the Democrats or Republicans that granted us civil rights, the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the end of racial segregation. It was mass movements of workers conducting mass civil disobedience. The anti-war movement of the 1960s and 70s, along with the combined power of the labor and civil rights movements, brought about the end of the Vietnam War under conservative and reactionary President Nixon. It was the militant rank-and-file Teamsters and auto workers of the 1930s, led by socialists, whose victories led to an explosive growth in the labor movement. Breaking away with the conservative union leadership at the time, they organized using a class struggle approach and carried out collective strike action that effectively shut down the city of Minneapolis in 1934. By disturbing business as usual and fighting for union recognition with over 3,000 members collectively taking strike action, workers won their demands for a 40-hour work week, overtime pay, and wage increases. Working people cannot rely on the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, or the business unionist leaders to end the wars, to create a living wage, or fight back against these coming attacks from the Trump administration. The Biden administration provided billions of dollars in military aid to Israel, ignoring international humanitarian laws and prioritizing a government committing a live-stream genocide over the needs of families in California who suffered wildfires. Shame. The Biden administration and Democrats made it illegal for railroad workers to go on a national strike, siding with executives, over 100,000 workers, fighting for paid sick time and better working conditions. Shame. The Democratic Party abandoned their promise to increase the federal minimum wage or codify Roe v. Wade into law. It was mass movements led by Socialist Seattle City Council member Kshama Sawant against the Democrats that led to the first $15 minimum wage in a major city, which is now $20.75 an hour. Under fighting socialist leadership, working people also won renters' rights, including the winter eviction moratorium, the first anti-caste discrimination law outside of South Asia, turning Seattle into an abortion sanctuary city with free abortion for all, and the second city in the US to pass a ceasefire resolution in solidarity with Palestinians amidst the genocidal war on Gaza. We cannot allow the Democrats to pose as the resistance against Trump. And we cannot allow sellouts like Bernie Sanders to lead working people back into the billionaire-backed party that financed a genocide. Shame indeed, while they attacked the free speech of anti-war activists in our schools and workplaces, only now are they willing to criticize the Israeli government. They financed this genocide. They do not deserve our support. They are not the resistance to what is happening. There is no reforming this capitalist party hell-bent on imperialism and war. A union is the best tool and protection that a worker has of being engaged in struggle to fight for change in the workplace and in the country as a whole. Worker Strike Back members have successfully filed union resolutions in their unions, rallied support for Amazon workers fighting to unionize in various facilities, and we need to build a powerful movement to fight for what we need, including Medicare for all, and an end to Trump's anti-worker attacks and good union jobs for all. Thank you. Thank you. I encourage you to join us at Workers Strike Back. Join the movement. Fight the rich in their two parties. When we fight, when we fight, when we fight, solidarity.
Thank you so much, Gray, and to all healthcare workers. So our wonderful video tech person has pulled together an exciting sort of video montage. We've heard a lot about what Worker Strike Back members have been doing over the last year, but we want you to see it. So we're going to play that quickly before we have our next speaker come up. So roll that beautiful footage up in the
If you're serious about turning things around, if you're serious about unionizing Amazon and workplaces across the country, we cannot just tweak the status quo. We need a reckoning. We need to return to the kind of militant fighting ideas that the labor movement was built on. That's why we're launching Worker Strike Back.
There are battles to be waged across the country as workers and young people move into struggle in their workplaces, schools, and into the streets. They're looking for the kind of political approach, the class struggle approach, understanding, and methods that Kshama's office has shown can win. We're building on the example of the past decade in Seattle on a national scale to widen and strengthen the class struggle. Who here wants to be a part of that movement?
We forced the city establishment to lift the wages of 100,000 low-wage workers in Seattle, to transfer $3 billion from business to workers at the bottom of the wage scale over the next 10 years. We did it. Workers did this. Today's first victory for 15 will inspire people all over the nation.
It was won through a socialist strategy, a class struggle-based strategy. It wasn't won through negotiation or discussions with the mayor at that time. It wasn't won through, unfortunately, the leadership of the labor movement either. We had to push through a strategy that it had opposition from all corners. It included a ballot initiative threat that if the Democrats didn't pass a strong 15, that we would take it to voters on the ballot. We had hundreds of people pack into council chambers. We had marches and rallies of hundreds of people, mass organizing conferences. All of this was necessary to force them to pass this.
We're here both to celebrate a victory and to get ourselves better organized in this fight. As many of you know, people who are watching on the live stream, the Democrats withdrew their bill attacking Seattle's minimum wage, the bill would have immediately robbed over 200,000 workers of at least $3 per hour of wages. Can you imagine robbing the most vulnerable workers of their wages? On Friday, Councilmember Hollingsworth, who brought that odious bill forward, backed down. This is our victory. It belongs to working people, to union members, to workers' strike back. Today's vote to pass an Amazon tax in Seattle is a historic victory for working people. This victory was hard fought and it was hard won by a movement that wouldn't give up and that faced down a seemingly endless series of obstacles, from the shameful attempts of corporate Democrats in the state legislature to pass a ban on municipal big business taxes, to unfounded delays in the city council, to a pandemic and lockdown which prevented signature gathering, to relentless attacks in the corporate media in Seattle and nationally. We are winning because of the determination of workers and socialists to smash all obstacles and to find a path to victory.
Winning the original Amazon tax here in 2020 was a huge and hard-fought victory for working people. Amazon and big business made it clear during that fight that they will fight tooth and nail to protect the profits made for them by the labor of working people.
Working people face a cost of living crisis, and we need to tax the wealthy to fund affordable housing, which can be achieved through voting yes on Proposition 1A. Proposition 1A is a ballot initiative that will add to the Amazon tax. If it's passed, Prop A will tax wealthy businesses like Amazon to secure $52 million for affordable housing in our city. The billionaires and their allies want working people to fight for scraps when we have created every cent of profit Amazon or Microsoft or any corporation has ever made, and it's time for them to pay up.
To fight back against coming attacks from our city's Democrats trying to roll back victories from former city council member and socialist Shama Sawant's office, which assured protections no other city in the U.S. has. These are protections like a renter's bill of rights that requires landlords to give at least 6 months notice before raising rents. Landlords to provide relocation assistance when you have to move. The eviction defense bill, which allows tenants to fight evictions by declaring a financial hardship from the pandemic. The school year eviction ban, winter eviction bans. These are all important victories that we won on the basis of working class movements in Seattle.
This bill is not technically complicated. It is a very simple question. Should discrimination based on caste be allowed to continue in Seattle? But while simple, it is also profound and historic. Caste is a system of oppression that divides people into a rigid hierarchy of groups based on birth, with the lower groups facing serious discrimination, oppression, and even violence. It originates from about 2,000 years ago in South Asia, but remains pervasive today under capitalism. Around the world, an estimated 250 million people faced caste-based discrimination. And we know that Seattle's victory was truly historic. It is the first such ban against caste discrimination in jurisdiction of any level globally outside South Asia. The story of the fight that we had is going to echo, is going to reverberate beyond tonight, and many other ordinary people are going to ask us all, how did we win that? And so it's our responsibility to share with them the story of how we were able to win only because we actually had a resolution in the first place that put a spotlight on the Democrats, that forced them to take a stand. And at first, they acted like they didn't have to, but then they were forced to. And then, in the presence of hundreds of people, they were forced to listen to our points and then forced to vote yes on a ceasefire resolution. This is how we believe elective office should be used for the working class, where our office becomes a platform for a larger movement. And that is
Working people are fed up. They are really angry at what's happened over these last 4 years. They are really angry about the cost of living crisis. They are really angry about the broken promises, and they're really angry at the progressive Democrats who completely sold them out also.
If one section of the working class scores a major victory, it will embolden all of us to fight for more.
Yeah.
Like our Tax Amazon campaign, like our election victories against Amazon's $1 million money bombs, victory is contagious. We need to build a new party of working class people who doesn't just be the lesser of two evils, but goes on the offensive to fight for working class people and put demands like $25 an hour as a minimum wage nationally on the agenda.
All right. It's funny that I'm at the end of that. So yeah, I thought that visual representation would be really helpful for folks. And it's a really great segue to our next speaker. His name is Logan Swan. He's a rank and file member of Ironworkers Local 86. And he played a leading role, an elected role on the Tax Amazon Organizing Committee. And he's going to touch on some of those lessons today.
Logan Swan, I'm a member of Workers Strike Back and Revolutionary Workers, as well as a journeyman iron worker and a longshore casual. So while we're born into our class position, nobody's born a revolutionary. Like everyone, I joined this movement with some confused and backwards politics. Coming of age and entering the workforce during recession, in the absence of political leadership from labor leaders, during that crisis, I drew the conclusion that we don't have jobs because of outsourcing through things like NAFTA and so on. So that if we wanted to see a return of like good union jobs, people like me had to buy union-made, American-made. I didn't get a smartphone until Motorola had one, I think, made in Texas. I bought Union Line jeans, Union House boxer briefs, a Ricker vacuum, a Ricker vacuum made in Missouri. If I couldn't find something made in the US, I would hit a thrift store or I'd go without it. And mind you, at the time I was a non-union steelworker. I made $12.40 an hour. I lived in low-income housing. It fucking sucked. So this changed nothing. The ruling class doesn't care about these kinds of individual choices. It wasn't yet clear to me that those good union jobs that people talk about were owed to the legacy of class struggle of the labor movement. And that the degeneration of our condition was due to the class collaboration and the political cowardice of the leaders of our unions. Their cynical pragmatism of accepting the limitations imposed by the Republicans and Democrats, the absolute minimum our employers would concede to in contract negotiations. I started organizing as a socialist at the same time that I began my apprenticeship in the building trades as an iron worker. The experiences of organizing in the successful 15 Now campaign, fighting to tax Amazon to create union jobs, building affordable public-owned housing, were part of my apprenticeship, but unfortunately not as a rank-and-file union member, but as a socialist. I was radicalized and tempered by the society we lived in with all of its contradictions and injustices. So I'm going to focus on tax Amazon and the lessons from that struggle. And we campaigned on legislation to create 10,000 union building trades jobs, not building shiny new stadium or for some billionaire funded by regressive taxes on workers and homeowners, but building public housing for us with a bill paid for by the billionaires. And this wasn't like, we didn't just like have this fully hammered out thing and just go to working people and say, hey, we're doing this, take it or leave it. This is our campaign. We came forward with, with this idea, with this program of taxing big business, addressing the affordable housing crisis through creating union jobs, building affordable housing. And we flyered outside workplaces, we postered, we organized action conferences, and that was where the real decisions were made. None of this was done behind closed doors. The decisions were made through elections of a coordinating committee at the Action Conference, and they were voted on at those Action Conferences. That anyone, if you support this, come out and be a part of this. That's in total contrast to how we see campaigns being run through the establishment or even through the NGOs and even well-meaning people where they think what's best for people and they come out and say this is supported or not, and if you don't, fuck you. Like no, this was a decision made by people in the community, but with the leadership from socialists, from trade union militants. And it was through that, going and talking to rank-and-file union members and having them organize in their unions and pressuring union leaders to support this, that we got a majority of local unions to endorse it because, it was either, we created a thing that could not be ignored, right? But unfortunately, despite the endorsement of the local labor council and the majority of the local unions, the building trades leadership chose to effectively scab on our movement, running defense for Jeff Bezos and the Democrats backing him. My own union's leadership went so far as calling Amazon a, quote, responsible builder that doesn't have, quote, a requirement to pay a prevailing wage, but they do. This servile praise has aged horribly, with Amazon being slapped with fines for union busting, forcing workers to piss in bottles, trapping workers in a warehouse during a tornado, killing 6. Not to mention the testimony from Brother Idolo here from Cause. But it smacks of the majority of labor leaders' race to the bottom strategy of class collaboration, partnering with employers that's seen the conditions of workers, both union and non-union, plummet. And tragically, this bankrupt strategy has only been doubled down upon by the likes of Shawn Fain and Sean O'Brien, who promised to change from the corrupt regimes leading UAW and the Teamsters, only to continue the policy of cowardice of their predecessors as they suck up to the Trump administration and champion the tariffs of, the America First. Shawn Fain is supporting Trump's xenophobic tariffs on imported goods, while Sean O'Brien has gone so far as to speak in favor of right-to-work union busting, saying he'll collaborate with on union busting state by state. What may work for one doesn't work for the other. Who's to know? Yeah, fucking boo. Absolutely fucking shameful. And that... And that he was put forward, people have real confidence put in this guy that he was going to change things. And it's a shocking betrayal, and he should not be left off the hook by it. The left, the union activists cannot let these guys off the hook. So much like the building trades leader here ran cover for the Democrats and Jeff Bezos, O'Brien and Fain are doing the same for Elon Musk and the Republicans today. And this is a dead end. The political parties of the bosses do not offer a way forward for American workers, and we will be forced to pay the cost of these tariffs. The history of the labor movement is international. The counterpoint to this America First nonsense is, why are our international unions why weren't they organizing auto workers in Mexico when after the automakers got bailed out following the recession and said, man, we got all this money, we're going to throw it into developing factories in Mexico? Why didn't you go fucking organize them? Why are you instead saying, look at those guys, they're taking our jobs, they're driving down our wages? That's because you won't fucking organize them. Why do our union leaders pull punches so as not to challenge or embarrass the political establishment? Like working with Biden, as O'Brien did, to break the rail strike. Our Tax Amazon fight worked in the exact opposite direction of that. We organized independently from the Democrats, rallying workers, young people, renters, union members to challenge and expose anyone who sided with big business through our action conferences and protests. We're not gonna run cover for you while you betray working people. We're not gonna subordinate working people's needs to your political career. And despite the quisling efforts of Democrats and labor fakers, we won a tax on Amazon and big business to the tune of over $200 million a year. And so that's, I think when it's like, how are we going to win things? I think that we have lessons here, we have experience here of fighting and winning. We have a track record. And because it came up in the breakout discussion I was in, may not have come up in all of them, but I think there's been a lot of discussion around how, when we're presented with crisis after crisis and an absence of leadership and a clear approach on a fight back, that people say, how do we help one another within our community? And there's a lot of talk about mutual aid. And hopefully I'm not being too sharp here, but mutual aid, in my opinion, absent class struggle, it's just collectivized charity. We cannot address our needs with our already meager material resources. We can't rob from Peter to pay Paul. That doesn't work. What's needed is a political struggle to take what we need back from the billionaires who stole it from us. And there's a historical precedent for this. The origins of my own union began with mutual aid. Sorry. The Bridgman's Mutual Association was formed by ironworkers, who at the time, that was the most dangerous job in the country, to pool funds so that workers killed on the job would have their funeral costs paid for, with some money for the wife and children left behind. But this did nothing to address the unabated construction fatalities or the poverty wages of my forebears. And it wasn't until workers began militant organizing drives and successfully unionized that pay and conditions improved. Because this did change the balance of power between the workers and their bosses. So I want to thank you all for showing up today, but it would be negligent to just leave it at that. Today is not enough. Everyone in this room has a job to do in the struggles ahead. And every single one of you, I'm looking at you with the shawl, you guy in the white shirt back there, every single fucking one of you, you fucking matter and you can do shit. After our breakout group, there was a healthcare worker who asked me about, how do I organize? It's fucked, right? And healthcare is fucked. How do I, with my coworkers, like there's nothing left. And that's that your workplace is political. Your workplace is where you organize. Like, and if you don't have a union, then the best thing for someone who wants to start a union is to organize with your coworkers and start acting like a union. And that's when we talk about concretely organizing, is to see yourself not as someone that things happen to, but someone who takes action, someone who realizes that there are daily conditions that are unacceptable. That's the conditions of all of us. And if you talk to any one of us, chances are you're going to find that common ground. And that's the basis on which we can get organized. And that's what I think tomorrow with Workers Strike Back around a Fight the Rich campaign that crystallizes, it makes concrete how we can address those things. And then it's up to us as individuals to go back, not to be like, I went to the conference, it was great, back to regular, right? It's to go into our workplace, into our communities, into our unions, and have those conversations and bring them to the next meeting. And anyway, I think I'm probably like way over time, but every single one of us needs to organize in our apartment buildings, workplaces, unions, communities for mass actions, including protests, occupations, and strikes. Obviously, we build up to those things, but we shouldn't be embarrassed about the strategy of our struggle. And I'm not going to pretend that it's going to be easy. Respect to Brother King, but there's no arc of a moral universe that bends toward justice. There is only class war, the outcome of which will be decided by whether or not regular people like us wage the necessary struggle to fight back. So I would appeal to everyone here to join Workers Strike Back if you're not already a member. Let's learn from our proud history of class struggle, and let's make full use of our being here in this room, and let's get organized today to fight for tomorrow. Solidarity.
Thank you, Logan. That was an amazing speech. Okay, so the next person I'd like to welcome to the stage is Tiso Karina, who is a rank-and-file member of Teamsters Local 223, a union of United Staff and a member of Teamsters Mobilize. He's been down in Oregon supporting the strike of 5,000 nurses who are organized with the Oregon Nurses Association at Providence Health. And ONA nurses won a tentative agreement just yesterday as a result of their strike.
Can everybody hear me okay? Awesome. Well, I want to thank Brother Logan for that speech, because that was a hell of a speech, so I want to give him a round of applause again. So I want to say hi to begin with to all of our Teamsters that are watching out there, because I know there's quite a few of us watching. I also want to read first a statement from Teamsters Mobilize, us as a group. On behalf of Teamsters Mobilize, we thank the organizers of this Workers Strike Back Organizing Conference. We are appreciative of this platform. And as many have said today, in the words of the great the IWW, an injury to one is an injury to all. Teamsters Mobilize started in 2022 in the lead up to the 2023 UPS contract, and many of us came together as UPS part-timers to address our issues and concerns. Some of us who didn't work for UPS stood in solidarity with our Teamster family at that point. We are a grassroots, rank-and-file-led organization inside the Teamsters. Our mission is to engage, educate, and empower rank-and-file Teamsters and every worker. We are committed to bringing a militancy, transparency, and democracy to the Teamsters. And right now, if you've been watching everything in the past 72 hours, it's probably needed more than ever. That being said, we are ready to fight the bosses and the class collaborators in the leadership of our union who serve to weaken it rather than strengthen it, and you know who you are in leadership. We reject the political duopoly that seeks to divide and conquer the working class. The working class and ruling class have nothing in common. Nothing in common. Specifically, our General President, Sean O'Brien, who you've heard a lot about today, has recently come out in support of Donald Trump's xenophobic, nativist policies, and of course, publicly endorsed the right of state governments to enforce right-to-work laws. Just a fucking betrayal, quite frankly, as Brother Logan said. Now is the time to act to save our union. And I hope everybody that's watching on the live stream that's Teamsters are hearing that. Even non-Teamsters, I hope everybody's hearing that right now. And we as Teamsters Mobilize are gonna be at the forefront of that battle line, because we have to be. We're eager to work collectively and collaboratively with all brothers, sisters, and siblings who are dedicated to the cause of working people and will stand by your side with that aim firmly in sight. Now, these are the comments that I want to add in addition to the statement. A lot of it's already been framed in the Teamsters Mobilize statement that I read, but it's been hard for me to keep up with what seems like an endless barrage of bad decisions coming from Teamsters leadership. I personally was a very strong supporter of the Oz slate, and I walked for him, a lot of other people that are on that slate. And I can tell you, I've personally talked to some of these officers and expressed the betrayal that I feel from our leadership. And that was a hard conversation to have. And some of these examples, things I've already articulated, the anti-immigrant sentiment, the support for anti-labor candidates as previously stated. Specifically, leadership has said time and time again, we're gonna hold both parties accountable. We're gonna hold all politicians accountable that are anti-worker and anti-labor. And quite frankly, all I've seen, and I'm not in love with the Democrats by any means, but all I've seen is a lot of shit talking about Democrats and not holding the right wing accountable at all. We need to hold both accountable, but I'm only seeing one side getting hit at all. That being said, I want to be real clear here. Sean O'Brien does not speak for all of us as Teamsters, and if you think that, think twice, because it's just not true, and I'm here to prove that. And I do want to emphasize that what we need to do in terms of a plan to change, we need to have a plan to change the culture of all of our unions. It's not just about the Seans, any specific leader. You know, they're not the root cause of the issue. They are absolutely the perpetrators primarily right now, but they are not the root cause of the issue. In fact, the root cause of the issue has probably been around longer than some of us in this room have even been around. So we need to push back against these bad values in our unions, these values that have been around for generations, quite frankly. And we've inherited that fight unfortunately, and we're the ones that are going to have to deal with it. So we need to do it right, and we need to engage it head on and not be afraid of it anymore. Like I've mentioned, much of how I feel has already been articulated by Teamsters Mobilize. I hope some of you will come to our meetings and see what we're all about and see that, you know, we're the folks pushing reform in this union, the reform that we desperately so need. And I want to say I'm glad that we've come together to make our union and our movements better places, because there's a lot of folks in our movement, or sorry, in our union that don't feel that we have any business doing anything out of wages, hours, and working conditions. And I'm here to tell you that that is not true, and we are pushing back against that openly and actively. Our movement is intersectional, and anybody that doesn't believe in that is a fucking traitor to the labor movement, bar none. So I want to thank the Teamsters that are in our union now and in the past who paved the road for progressive voices in our union. Their work continues through ours. There have been folks in our union that risked everything, including their lives, to make this union a more militant, democratic, and transparent union. So I just want to give acknowledgement of that, including my mentor who passed recently, Alan Baird, who was the director of the Coors boycott in Northern California in the mid-'70s. And in the spirit of organizing, before I close, we are having a special meeting on March 2nd at 2 p.m. Pacific. Our topic's going to be No ICE Raids and Know Your Rights. It'll be on our socials, and this is keeping in line with our movement is intersectional, and anybody that doesn't believe that should not be in this movement. Thank you. Solidarity.
Thank you so much. That was an amazing speech. I'm sure we've all enjoyed our speakers so far. Our next speaker is the leader of the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru movement, political theorist and strategist who's developed the theory of African internationalism. He's traveled to over 19 countries building black power struggles throughout Africa, Europe, and the Americas, and establishing solidarity relations with other colonized peoples' movements. He's driven the establishment of over 50 black community economic institutions across the United States designed to free African people from the colonial mode of production. Please welcome Chairman Omali Yeshitela.
I bring you greetings of Uhuru, which means freedom in Swahili. I want to express our appreciation for the work of Shama Sawant and those who organized this program, and I wish that I could be there with you in person today. I am Omali Yeshitela, Chairman of the African People's Socialist Party and leader of the Uhuru Movement for Worldwide African Liberation and Socialism. I began fighting the system of colonial capitalism in the 1960s. I'm still making that fight today, and we are closer than ever to winning total liberation for African and all oppressed peoples. I agree with the slogan of this conference that when we fight, we can win. We in the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru Movement have been fighting, and we are winning. Nearly 3 years ago, Biden's FBI violently raided 7 homes and offices of the Uhuru Movement in St. Louis, Missouri, and St. Petersburg, Florida, including my home, with flak-jacketed soldiers, laser-guided rifles, tanks, flashbang grenades, and drones. They took our phones, our computers, and our files. 9 months later, Biden's DOJ indicted me, along with 2 leaders of our party's white solidarity and reparations component, on federal charges of being agents of Russia. The so-called overt acts charged in the indictment are all expressions of what is supposed to be protected free speech. Running candidates on a reparations platform, testifying at United Nations reparations hearings, publishing articles in our newspaper, The Burning Spear, circulating a petition charging the United States government with genocide, speaking out against the U.S. proxy war against Russia and Ukraine, exposing the fact that NATO expansion toward Russian territory provoked the war that has now taken millions of lives. They tried to lock me up for 15 years. We were offered a plea deal, but we chose to fight. And we built a popular campaign in the streets and through the independent media. We went to trial last September. The jury found us not guilty of being Russian agents, but guilty of conspiring to be Russian agents, conspiring to do something that didn't happen. We are appealing. In December, we were sentenced to 3 years probation. The judge said no prison time because everything in the indictment was protected free speech. The government knows that I don't work for Russia. They're upset because I don't work for them. I work for black people and the oppressed peoples of the world. I want to thank the many friends who are here today who supported us throughout the Uhuru 3's Fight Back campaign, including Jill Steiner, who came to Tampa, Florida for the start of the trial and spoke in our defense on her campaign trail. So today we hear cries of panic and fears from many who say that fascism is coming. But the conditions they anticipate being imposed on the general population are conditions that African and indigenous people in America and colonized people around the world experience daily. We live in a country that was founded on the brutal kidnapping and enslavement of millions of African people and the genocidal war waged against the indigenous people to steal and settle their land. Worldwide capitalism was founded and continues to depend on the colonial exploitation of the peoples and resources inside of America and around the world. That system is in crisis because colonized peoples around the world are seizing this moment to recapture our human and material resources. That's why we see the global shift in the political and economic configuration of the world that is also impacting inside the United States. Today, there is an uneasy equilibrium between the dying forces of the colonial mode of production and the rising tide of anti-colonial socialism. While some see this moment as proto-fascist, we remember that the proto-fascism of the McCarthy era was disrupted by the anti-colonial struggle of the civil rights movement that kept the society open for everyone. We in the African People's Socialist Party are preparing to govern. At the same time, as we are fighting for policy changes within the current system, through campaigns for community control of the police, opposition to gentrification, and freeing political prisoners like the just-released Leonard Peltier, we are creating our own ability to feed, clothe, and house our people, negating the colonial mode of production that keeps us enslaved. As an example, in our headquarters in the black community in North St. Louis, we have acquired over a dozen dilapidated properties and built a community garden, a farmer's market, a workforce housing for released prisoners, recreation facilities, and events venues. We have begun to work to build a women's health center and 2 bakery cafes in St. Petersburg, Florida. We operate an FM radio station, a food kitchen, an events venue, and publish our monthly newspaper, The Brown Spear. Indeed, when we fight, we can and do win. We look forward to working with you all and to build a world where everyone can enjoy peace, prosperity, and happiness, no one group at the expense of another. We are winning. Uhuru.
Thank you so much to Chairman O'Malley for sending that video of solidarity. I think showing the breadth and strength of this movement is a really important part of today, so we all leave feeling energized. And in that vein, we also have today with us Nick Cruz from the Revolutionary Blackout Network, which is a Black-led multicultural network of activists and citizen journalists focusing on empowering communities through education, organizing, and direct action. So go ahead and roll that for me, please.
What's poppin', my friends? Thank you for inviting me and allowing me to speak. It's unfortunate I wasn't able to make it. I had a lot of fun meeting you guys in Chicago and Seattle. I much prefer doing these in person. So I want to thank Shama for giving me the opportunity to still record a video despite not making it in person. Right now, it's very important for us to stay active and stay mobilized because we are just witnessing another pendulum swing. It's inevitable that Donald Trump will disappoint MAGA. That's just a simple fact of the situation. The capitalist class will always portray the working class, and there will be a lot of poor and working class people who will be left behind in the MAGA economy. There are a lot of people who will see Donald Trump serving Israel in the military-industrial complex, and they will feel betrayed because they thought they was voting for someone who was anti-war. That's why it's extremely important for us as a working class movement, as socialists, as people who are class conscious, to be there for the working class as they are abandoned by the ruling class. And this time right now is very interesting because we have a lot of Democrats that are going through some things right now because they are realizing that neoliberalism in the Democratic Party is inept, and liberalism is not the ideology you need to defeat Donald Trump. You need a populist movement. So when they are down, as they are questioning their political party and they are panicking, we have to be there for them and pick up the people who are disillusioned by the Democratic Party and their incompetence. There was millions of voters. Remember, 80 million people did not vote for the two-party duopoly. There was millions of people who voted for Biden who didn't vote for him the second election because of the genocide in Gaza, which is another important point, which is why we actually provide a real option for the working class. We need to provide an anti-Zionist, pro-peace, left populist movement. And this is where the Democratic Party failed, by pointing out the hypocrisies of American First, by manipulating the differences between the MAGA woke right who believe in Zionist censorship versus the MAGA influencers who are similar to Candace Owens and their followers who are starting to question Zionism. As Donald Trump continued to serve Israel, we have to be there to pick up the people who realize that Donald Trump actually doesn't stand for American First. This is why it's extremely important for us to establish that we are hostile towards the empire, that our number one priority is to end the military-industrial complex and the corruption that destabilizes the lives of Americans. And the majority of the American people are with us because, as I mentioned before, 80 million Americans did not vote for Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. And this is by design. The ruling class wants to disenfranchise well-informed working class people who want the best for their families. And there are many people in this country that wants to hold the billionaire class accountable, that want health care for their neighbors. 1 out of 3 Republicans support Medicare for all. The majority of independents, the majority of Democrats, the majority of people support ideas such as increasing the minimum wage, of ending the never-ending wars. But the ruling class distracts them with irrelevant culture war issues, which is used to distract the working class and convince poor white people to vote against their interests regarding the Republican Party. And many people who believe that the Democratic Party has the best interest for the LGBTQ community, they vote against their interests by voting for a genocidal Zionist capitalist in the Democratic Party. So it's very crucial, and this is why I implore us to do. We have to completely reject the culture war and the liberal identity politics, which is used to distract the workers from anti-war populist movement, which is actually meant to challenge the capitalist class, which is our number one goal, because just reforming the modes of capitalism will not end the corruption and will not end the exploitation of our people. So it's very important for us to have an anti-war, anti-Zionist, socialist working class movement to challenge the working class. And something else that I want to strongly emphasize is our biggest push for electoralism should be via ballot initiatives. In the last election, when the American people, including the extremely deep red state of Missouri, decided to vote for Donald Trump, they also voted for an increase of the minimum wage. They voted for affordable housing. They voted for economic populism over and over again in Missouri. So whenever the American people have a chance to choose, they would choose things like a Medicaid expansion, like Missouri voted for. Now we have the Missouri governor who wants to override the will of the voters, because we live in an authoritarian hellscape where there's no way that the people can actually express their will on the government, except via ballot initiatives where we had to force their hand, like what is happening in Missouri. So if you don't have ballot initiatives, that should be your primary focus. And I am meaning a very small percent being spent on electoralism. We need to spend our time being there for our communities, organizing for the working class and the poor, standing in solidarity with our Palestinian brothers and sisters, and advocating for an end of nuclear war. That should be our primary focus. I appreciate you guys for inviting me on, and I hope you guys are willing to work with us at Revolutionary Blackout as we continue to expand our mutual aid organization and mutual aid societies among the left. So thank you, Shama and Workers Strike Back, for inviting me once again. Thank you guys, and have a great rest of your conference.
Thank you so much to Nick Cruz and RBN. I think, all these folks who had to send videos, also for me, really underscores the sacrifice that everyone who's here in person really made, because we know we don't take for granted the time, the energy, the resources to travel. So we appreciate people who are able to send these solidarity messages. We now have actually a hybrid contribution. So we've got one person in person and one video from Do Dissidents. I think maybe we could get Russell to come up here for when we're doing Keaton so that you can have it sort of side by side. You're probably used to that. But yeah, I think Do Dissidents, they weren't on my radar ahead of this election. And then they took a singly just incredible, strong position. They joined us out in Chicago at the DNC. And we've just been, fighting alongside ever since. And we're really proud to have them here. So yeah, I think you're up first, and then we have Keaton's message. So yeah, welcome, Russell.
People keep asking me where Keaton is. I'm like, Keaton won't go to Connecticut, much less Seattle. Forget about it. I always think of the line in The Godfather. Hey, he could have had his own family. You couldn't get him out of that one meal town. All right, this is going to be maybe not the best opening of a speech today, but it's definitely going to be the dorkiest opening that you're going to hear. The great science fiction writer Frank Herbert, told you, opens his masterpiece with the line, "A beginning is the time for taking the most delicate care that the balances are correct." Why are beginnings delicate? Because they are by their nature unmoored and rootless. Any small thing can destroy an effort at its beginning, whether a novel, a business, a resolution, or a political party. Any distraction, any conflict, any loss of momentum, and it can all evaporate very quickly. Add to that the reality that we must face from this beginning so that we do not, as Shama might say, make illusions. The left is more broken on every level, from the cultural to the intellectual to the spiritual, than it has ever been in my lifetime, and arguably than it has ever been in this country. That is partly through self-inflicted wounds and partly a result of external pressure, sometimes exerted through the kind of infiltration and psychological operations that we now know for certain USAID, NED, the IRI, and many others have been. It would be naive to think they haven't been running the same kinds of operations here at home. And when we look at the state of the left, we must offer some grudging admiration for the effectiveness of their efforts. We saw the end result of those efforts recently when the DNC offered content creators a cash bonanza by streaming their race for a new chair. The high comedy of this pure distillation of the essence of what the Democratic Party has been reduced to by its Wall Street owners working in tandem with an activist wing that is only allowed to exist precisely because it is ridiculous and ineffective at advocating even for the narrow identitarian issues that are the only issues allowed them by the party's donor class. It was as clear a lesson for activists as Ozymandias in the desert. This once great and powerful political party brought low, and yet still there sticking up out of the sands of its own destruction to beg for money. Look on my works, ye mighty, and write a check. This was the final outcome of the Frankenstein's monster experiment of stitching together disparate elements of the civil rights movement, running them through a blender of tortured postmodernism, elevating obscure crackpot academics as spokespeople for the truly repulsive, zero-sum, all against all vision of society that came out the other side, and telling people this was what the left was all about. Not solidarity, identity. Not class, not the hard realities of material conditions. Instead, these ideas were replaced by a secular theology, with the villains often being the workers themselves, who hadn't been educated in the new jargon, and who not only didn't accept and embrace every new sexual and intellectual fetish of the ruling class, but often had the temerity to openly question them. As it turns out, polyamory is not a politics, and the hunt for microaggressions is no substitute for the hunt for better wages and free health care. And so the Democrats have not only fallen, hollowed out from the inside by the same narcissists and neurotics they let in to explain the purpose of their continued existence as a party after they sold out their old working class base. They have turned over the country to a re-energized Christian right that's going to end up making the Reagan Revolution look like Woodstock. This is where we are. And it should serve as a cautionary tale for any who are going to attempt to recover the lost power and reputation of the left. A political movement can survive hatred and hostility, but one thing it cannot survive is the perception that it is ridiculous. And by mistaking the need for tolerance with the need for indulgence, by confusing the mission of helping victims with the celebration of victimhood, by treating strength as a vice and incapacity as a virtue, not only the establishment left, but a good portion of the activist left has come to make itself look ridiculous. Any movement that indulges these ideas will end up being an enormous waste of time and money for all involved. The first person who wants to form a sub-caucus that has nothing to do with improving conditions for all workers should be, if not canceled and rejected, lest we become the same censorious prigs we condemn, given a firm talking to and a very clear and unambiguous refusal, so that the organization doesn't end up like the DNC or the DSA, or countless other attempts at focusing the energies of the left, devoured from within by people whose only purpose is to divide and weaken. For a left that's gone 40 some odd years without a serious union presence in its councils, or any real connection to laborers and tradesmen who may not think the way they do on every issue, repairing that relationship and reestablishing that connection is going to take a lot of humility and a serious course correction. This weekend, there is an opportunity to create a new vision that begins to repair the damage done by the Clinton ascendancy and the neoliberal politics it ushered in. We are fortunate to have so many talented people join in to help, including our many peers in the indie media space who have come together today to both appear on the live stream and to create a collective super stream of the event. And to lead the way forward, we couldn't have a better person than Shama, who is that rarest of things in this foul year of our Lord 2025, a leftist that wins things. As one of our viewers recently said, Kshama is ride or die. She has won tangible victories for workers against the corrupt Democrats and the oligarchy they serve. Kshama has beaten the Leviathan that is Amazon, both imposing a local tax and the first $15 minimum wage in the country. And how did she do it? By inviting everyone into the tent, without elevating or denigrating any below or above the others. That is how you win over workers. That is how you build solidarity. That is how you create an alternative in waiting for the moment when the foot soldiers of the MAGA movement, who need to pay rent, see a doctor, take a plane, or collect Social Security like everybody else, come to realize that tech bro billionaires were never coming to save them, only to preside over their final destruction as a class and to dismantle what meager protections they had left from the greed of their own. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Keaton Weiss from Due Dissidents. I'd have loved to have bought a plane ticket and flown out to be there in person, but for some reason my USAID check hasn't cleared this month. I called the Treasury Department to see what the issue could be, but no one answered. Instead, I got an automated message telling me that they're experiencing unusually high call volumes and that there were 328 white South African farmers ahead of me in the queue. So I never did get to the bottom of it, but in any event, it's a great pleasure to be able to address this conference. Back in May of 2021, during the brief but brutal to endure honeymoon period of the Biden administration, I struggled with how to, or even whether to, continue to engage politically. It was a very strange time when the country, coming out of the COVID lockdowns, seemed eerily content to settle back into the old pre-Trump way of doing things. Order had been restored, democracy had been rescued, of course, and normalcy had been reinstated. Lucky for me, though, despite having fallen into a pretty severe political depression, I had, months prior, committed to be a part of a telethon fundraiser for Kshama Sawant's effort against the Democrat-led recall in Seattle. And so in order to not break my commitments, I of course agreed to follow through and show up. And the evening of the fundraiser, I met Kshama and her team for the first time over a Zoom call in what was ultimately a 4 to 5 hour event. And for the first time, I saw what, if I'm being honest, I haven't really seen anywhere else at any moment since, which was a group of hardcore leftist activists who had their shit together, who could actually organize and win against the entrenched financial and political interests in Seattle. And win, they did. Kshama's team in Seattle pulled me back from the political brink. They kept me from falling into despair at a time when things seemed quite bleak. And today, of course, we find ourselves once again staring out at a political landscape that seems even more unforgiving than the one I just referenced, which is why I can think of no better place to be than here with many of that same team that so inspired me 4 years ago. Now, what makes these times even more difficult than before is that as the right wing amps up their assaults on ordinary people, the discredited liberal class has wrought enormous havoc by tarnishing the brand of noble left causes, tainting them in the minds of the working class. Environmentalism has been hijacked by uber-wealthy do-gooders who lecture the public from Davos, where they flew in on their gas-guzzling private jets. Anti-racism has been given a bad name by a cadre of PMC grifters like Ibram X. Kendi and Robin DiAngelo. The very concept of public health is now a controversial idea, thanks to the lies and mismanagement of a thoroughly corrupt for-profit medical system that destroyed what remained of its reputation these past 5 years since the pandemic struck. To be frank, liberal elites in and adjacent to the Democratic Party have failed at just about everything these past 8 years or so, except for one thing. They've succeeded in destroying the credibility of the American left by convincing the masses that we are one and the same. This is why the first and most urgent order of business for an emerging left movement is to make crystal clear in the mind of the public that we are not. In order to do this, we must remain laser focused on issues and causes that empower all working people of every race, color, and creed. Well, except for the white South African farmers. Fuck them. But everyone else should have a seat at the table, no matter who they voted for, how they identify, or, very importantly, I think, where they live. Workers from the East Coast to the West Coast, the Rust Belt to the Sun Belt, from the U.S.-Mexico border on down, in the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank. All working people facing subjugation, from wage slavery to human trafficking to ethnic cleansing and genocide, are our class allies and must be treated as such, no matter the ruling class's efforts to divide us against each other. If we stick together, and in the words of our now dear leader, fight, 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 together, we will, like Shama did before and has always done, in the end, win. So it's an honor to speak with you today. Thanks very much.
Okay, there we go. Our next speaker will be Hassan Abdel Salam, the co-founder of Abandon Biden, which then became the Abandon Harris movement. They challenged and turned away from the Democratic Party for their ongoing support of the genocide in Gaza. And ultimately, the Abandon Harris movement endorsed the anti-war campaign of Jill Stein and Butch Ware in 2024.
Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now. A lone voice. Relentless, again and again, calling for justice. Piercing through the cold on Minnesota pavement. November 1st, 2023. We stood our ground, announced that we will never vote for the president. We came out in droves in 2020, and we made President Biden the President of the United States. We witnessed enough, the brutality, the bombardments, 3 weeks of genocide. Intolerable to the American conscience, we had no other choice. Our strategy: to punish the president for his genocide, to send a signal to the political landscape that if you engage in genocide, you will lose the election. We persisted. People said, don't. The lesser of two evils. A ceasefire is coming. You're such a small population, people of conscience. You can't make a difference. The chorus of cynics, their voice never drowned our persistence. We walked and ran towards November 5th, holding hands singing "We Shall Overcome." From Arizona to Georgia, from Georgia to Wisconsin, from Pennsylvania to Nevada, from North Carolina to Minnesota. We spoke out, persuaded our friends and our neighbors. We canvassed, we texted, we protested, and we won. Victory on November 5th, to resound through history, that we punished the vice president at the hands of people of conscience. The numbers and the data reveal that if the vice president, the president, did not commit genocide, likely Vice President Harris would have won. Our path continues. Our victory on November 5th emboldens us. A first chapter in a long story in the winding path of justice. We ask you to join us as we try to build a movement for all Americans to call for justice in our foreign policy. America has been pernicious in the name of its exceptionalism. Its maimed, destroyed, attacked, displaced, and murdered innocents. And here domestically at home, our inhumane policies, at abandon Biden, abandon Harris, we rebrand, reinvigorate, to galvanize a new movement, calling for Medicare for all, Medicare negotiating drug prices, ending homelessness, and ensuring a humane foreign policy worldwide. I will never forget Brother Faris, the real founder of Abandon Biden, in that prison where I was held by Israeli forces who detained and tortured me for weeks in 2022, for no other reason than that we wished to protest peacefully. And there in prison, I met Brother Faris, one of the youth that I got to know that year. Him pacing before me back and forth in prison, he asked me that unforgettable question: what will you do if you go back home? If you go back to America? I never thought I'd go back. My interrogators promised me that I'd never be released. But I decided to answer, what will you do if you go back to America? I said I would speak out. And the most extraordinary thing happened on the face of Brother Faris. A huge, brilliant smile appeared. That what brought him pleasure is that you now would hear his story. That what brings the pleasure, the happiness on people oppressed worldwide, is the knowledge that together here, we would arrest the villainous atrocity and vices of our government, at home and abroad. And now, a new beginning. Let not the momentum dissipate. Join us in this movement with Workers Strike Back and the Green Party. Abandon Biden, abandon Harris. A movement for which we can say, finally, abandon genocide, abandon brutality, abandon injustice. Together, to bring a smile on Brother Faris's face and all those oppressed in our pursuit on this winding course towards justice.
All right. So I have 3 final speakers before we do our closing remarks today, and I appreciate everyone who's stayed through this conference. I know it has been educational and energizing, but also long. So we've got 3 final speakers, and we're calling this section Struggle Reports. Worker Strike Back members across the country have been organizing, as we've spoken to, in their communities, schools, and workplaces. And from those struggles and from victories, importantly, we have gleaned some important lessons. Part of being consciously organized is weighing up the lessons of every fight. And so we have a few Worker Strike Back members here to speak to that. First up, I've got Calvin Priest. He was the campaign manager for the Tax Amazon campaign, and he's also speaking to the hands-off 15 victory that was it's featured in the video that we had earlier. So please welcome warmly Calvin Priest.
As Emily said, I'm a member of Workers Strike Back. I'm also a member of Revolutionary Workers. So Kshama spoke earlier about our fight to win the $15 minimum wage, how we were able to defeat big business and the Democrats to win the highest minimum wage in the country. We knew when we won our victory that the fight wasn't over. And Kshama said as much in her victory speech, which we showed part of it on the video earlier. We knew because no fight is ever over under capitalism. The bosses and their political servants will pick their moment to go after that victory, to try to undermine it or get rid of it altogether. And we're seeing that again right now as the Republicans and Trump are preparing to go after Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare, some of the biggest victories of the US working class, with the help of the Democrats. This is one of the many reasons that capitalism cannot be reformed, that it has to be destroyed. Our victory on 15, though it was and is the strongest minimum wage law in the country, was incomplete. We weren't strong enough to win everything we were fighting for. In any fight with the bosses, whether we win, how much we win, is not about the morality of the bosses or the politicians or making persuasive arguments to them, because they have no morality. It comes down purely to the strength of our movement and our support within the wider working class versus the bosses. That's all that it's about. So with the help of many labor leaders, sadly, the Democrats ran through a series of loopholes in the legislation. One of them was they gave small business a 10-year-long phase-in before they had to pay tipped workers the full minimum wage. That had problems written all over it. To be clear, this was not because big business or the Democrats give a shit about small business. Obviously they don't. As we knew at the time, this was a loophole that they hoped they could cash in on later as an avenue to undermine and to start to unravel the law. And predictably, last summer, the Democratic City Council members, with the Socialists no longer in the City Council, decided to do exactly that, to begin their assault on Seattle's historic and massively popular minimum wage. They were totally dishonest about it. Again, they said it was all about small business. They said it was all about COVID and how it was so hard on small business, how it was unexpected, despite the very obvious fact that it was workers who paid the price for the pandemic. They used identity politics. They had the sole black member of the City Council be the one to trot out this attack. Joy Hollingsworth is her name. And by the way, we should always name our enemies. We should use their names. We defeated them. We defeated them using the same strategy we have used in all of our fights. Because since no fight is ever over under capitalism, until we destroy it, that's what we have to do. We built a movement. We called a press conference. We organized an action conference. We mobilized to City Hall. We politically called them out, slammed them in the City Council chamber, including Hollingsworth explicitly. We exposed all of their lies. We said that any of them voting to dismantle 15 needed to be booted out of office. And we did win. And as of January 1st of this year, Seattle's minimum wage is $20.76 an hour. Obviously, it's still not enough. But we defeated big business and the Democratic Party again. We defeated them in their attempts to create a sub-minimum, permanent sub-minimum wage in this city and deny workers the more than $3 an hour raise that they needed to survive. We did that even without the benefit of a Seattle City Council. In addition to defending 15, our movement also just won an offensive victory. We campaigned for the Prop 1 ballot initiative, which expands our Amazon tax that we won in 2020 to fund affordable housing. We canvassed and tabled and answered the lies of the corporate media again. The NGOs that filed the ballot initiative, unfortunately, did not want to antagonize big business and the establishment, so the increase was only for $52 million a year. It raised our Amazon tax victory that we won in 2020, raised $450 million last year by itself. So while we disagree with those NGO leaders, it was nonetheless an important victory. And it shows, I think, very clearly the huge support there is for taxing the rich and big business right now. It shows the huge anger at Amazon. And it shows that we don't have to sit back and only carry out defensive fights. We can also go on the offensive and win. And we have beat Amazon, I've lost count now, I think 4 times. And so I think there is a space to bring a much stronger version of the Amazon tax initiative, both here and in other cities, because affordable housing is a crisis everywhere, as is the massive anger at the rich. I also wanted to make a couple of quick points about mutual aid. So I know there's a lot of discussion about mutual aid, and I basically agree with what Logan said earlier. It's completely understandable that people feel that they want to do something for the people that they know that are struggling, but the problem is we have limited resources, we have limited energy, and we can win offensive victories like these. We can make the billionaires pay rather than trying to struggle to, for GoFundMes, et cetera, to try to get by. And that's really the best direction for our energies, not only because they're the ones with the billions and not us, which is the critical point, but also because in engaging in class struggle, people learn. That is how you build a movement, that's how you build an ongoing movement, and that's how you create leaders. It is through these fights, the $15 minimum wage fight, the tax Amazon fight, the fight for renters' rights that we fought. That is how we built leaders, that's how we built an organization, that's why we have Workers Strike Back right now. That's why we're having this conference right now. And so we need to build on that. It's very easy for us to get dispersed and go in different directions and do different things and get tied up with the many people struggling under this system. But the way people learn is through struggle. And so it's absolutely crucial that our orientation be towards strategically taking on fights where we can do real damage to the bosses, where sometimes we can win, and where we can build a stronger movement going forward rather than constantly being on the defensive.
Yes, it sucks to play defense all the time. That is absolutely true. I'd like to introduce our next 2 speakers, Matthew Malloy and Keel, who are student worker organizers at the University of Missouri, and they're here to talk to us about their struggle to gain a $25 an hour minimum wage.
Hear me okay? So just correction, it's Kyle, but that's okay. It's spelled differently, so. It's spelled K-I-E-L, so that's probably what the confusion is. Anyway, so I'm gonna start. So my name is Kyle Corcoran, and I'm excited to be here, everybody, today. So I'm glad to see all the comrades here today, and I'm gonna say it's a privilege to speak and share my experience as a graduate worker within the University of Missouri system, and as an organizer in Kansas City, and as a member of Workers Strike Back, and also as a member of our emerging union, which we'll call the University of Missouri United Workers. So, okay, I'm gonna describe something here. So the University of Missouri system it's made up of 4 different universities in Missouri, right? So you have St. Louis, you have Columbia, you have UMKC, and you have Missouri Science and Tech, which is in North, right? So they have about $2 billion for an endowment. So on average, so the system pays its top academic office. So what I mean chancellors, I mean provost, I mean the president, about $1 million. The president for the UM makes about 2.5. So if you compare that to student workers, right? Student workers are the backbone of the UM system at all levels. So graduate, undergraduate, professional students, right? So undergrads typically work a lot of on-campus jobs. So we're talking about library services, which all students use. They use them for the front desk, they use them to get the books. You know, they even have staff record, like the rec centers are staffed by undergrads all the time. So they run the front desk, they run the equipment, that type of stuff. They even pay them to do tutoring for fellow students, right? So graduate students are a little more complex. So for most of the time, they have them do research or they have them do teaching, right? But the thing is, if everybody stops working, the graduate undergrads, the campuses aren't going to work, right? They're going to grind to a halt. So on average, the dollar amount for undergrad workers is about $9 to $12 an hour. So for a university that has $2 billion for an endowment, they're paying someone to man a desk $9 an hour. So yeah, they don't really care. So they know it, they don't care, right? And graduate workers make about $1,800 a month. That's the max. So like how UMKC works, it has different grad programs, right? So it pays them differently. And like STEM are more focused, so that's the max you're gonna get. And that's once a month, $1,800. Yeah, so it's not enough, but again, they don't care about any of that. So let's be honest, nobody can live on $1,800 a month, let alone $9 a month when you're young. It doesn't matter if you have a family or you're single, right? You can't live on that. So like I know that from experience. Like I've taught Forum at UMKC for about 2 years, was their math classes and some of their like undergrad math classes, right? And I have a son who's about 16 months old, and it was a struggle to get by. Like I had to borrow money from the dean. He was really nice, he gave me money, but and then as I'm also the president of the graduate student council, right? And people will come to us and say, we don't make enough money. We teach 2 classes, and when, like one person, like we go to the school, they tell us that they can't do anything about it, and they'll tell them to go to the food pantry. A bunch, yeah. Which is, again, it's very frustrating if you're working 2 classes, or if you're teaching 2 classes and you're taking classes, and then you go, well, I get paid once a month and I have a bill, and they're like, go to the food pantry. They just don't care, right? So the idea is that we have to take these on. Like, these wages are unacceptable. Tuition, rent, and basic living expenses keep rising, right? In the school, the university of itself, across all these 4 schools, aren't responding to any of this, right? This is unfair because, like I said, students don't only work, they are people outside of the classroom. So they have families and responsibilities. So again, it's not fair to them. This is all, if like the students don't work, then the faculty and the administrators can't run the universities, right? But they get paid a lot more than we do. So when we bring it up to them, right, their attitude is to shut down any type of discussion about this. So like we try to get papers, the school papers, to put out stories. They will do interviews and then get student experience, and then at the end they will pull it and say that the school has put pressure on them to not publish just a paper about working conditions, not about a paper about unions or a call, just to say this is on average what a student worker makes, right? And then, which is unacceptable. They've even told some students that they can't talk about unions at all, and they sometimes threaten to fire them too, but yeah, that's unacceptable. They also, for international students, it's even worse because they are afraid to organize or even speak because of what they think that the school is going to do, right? So, and then, so all this to summarize all this. This experience is reverse something I know. Student workers need to fight back, right, against an administration. So this is kind of when we launched the University of Missouri Students and Workers United, or UMSWU for short. And then alongside Workers Strike Back is helping us. And right now we're trying to table at UMKC as a start about 3 times a week to get people to sign a petition. This petition's about $25 an hour for undergrad, professional, graduate work minimum, no exceptions to that. And then also international students in the UM system are forced to pay a health insurance fee up front. So that's about $1,500 they have to provide. And they can't, and then they're not allowed to get medical services because they restrict them to just use it on campus. So it's not very fair. I don't know what they're doing. They just don't care. Yeah. So yeah, we supported also we're demanding medical for all in this. We wanted to support because there are schools in the UM system that support the Gaza and they support Israel with the genocide. We don't demanding that to stop. Like UMKC is pretty bad. They do. We want that to stop. Here, nobody should be supporting genocide. They should not use methods of education to do so, right? So then to end it on March, if anybody's watching Kansas City, we're going to have a rally, the live rally at March 8th at 2 p.m. at the Charles B. Will Amphitheater. If that's fight, UMKC across the river. So we would love for you to come and show out, and we want to get as much support as we can for this because students are suffering and they should not be told to go to the food pantry as a result for trying to just better themselves. Yeah. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, everybody. My name is Matthew. I am a socialist, member of Workers Strike Back and Revolutionary Workers. So Kyle described the work that we're doing in Kansas City, organizing student workers around a $25 an hour minimum wage and free health care. He's described how even the university administration at a state university is so hostile to workers and their rights. We've just been, as I said, just organizing around these 2 demands, and students have been intimidated. Some students are afraid of losing their student visas because a lot of the student workers at this university are international students. Even in this early stage, the university is using xenophobic and racist intimidation, even in just this early stage of organizing. We know that workers can win nothing without a fight, without a ferocious fight. And for example, after Seattle workers won the $15 an hour minimum wage with the leadership of the 15 Now movement and Shama's Socialist City Council office, the University of Washington administration refused to pay up, saying the city law did not apply to them as they were a state institution. The unions and workers at UW, joined by 15 Now and Shama, held protest rallies and publicly forced the administration to concede back then. We must always keep in mind how local, state, or even national fights fit within the larger class war. This is why, one of the demands on our petition is ending the genocidal war in Gaza. The University of Missouri system is invested in the genocide. And so obviously, the labor movement and workers have a key role in ending this war. And even early on in these stages of our organizing, we want to inject that international solidarity into it. So Workers Strike Back and University of Missouri Students and Workers United are only getting started, but we understand how important this fight is. We have talked to about 150 students so far in Kansas City, and it's clear that the vast majority of them are angry and are looking for a way to fight back. It's clear that if students could win a $25 an hour minimum wage, that it could ripple out and set a new standard for wages across the city, which is currently $13.50 an hour, and put enormous pressure on big business and the city's mostly Democratic politicians. But we have to be very sober about what it will take to win something like this. We saw what it took for the Seattle 15 Now campaign to win $15 an hour, and I join Kyle in urging those watching from the live stream in Kansas City to attend our rally on March 8th. This is going to be a 25 Now rally. These students need support from workers outside of the university because, as they said, the amount of Students that we talk to that want to be in this fight, but they're afraid of the intimidation, they need support from their fellow workers. And also, this fight for 25 is a fight for every worker. You know, as 15 wasn't won anywhere until it was won in the city of Seattle. You know, a win for workers anywhere is a win for workers everywhere. This is something we have to fundamentally understand in this movement. Labor and working class history shows us we must look beyond the workplace. As I said, one of UMSW's very first demands was a demand to end the genocide in Gaza and that the University of Missouri completely divest from the weapons industry profiting from Israel's war on occupation. Workers must build international solidarity if they are to combat the divide and conquer strategies of the billionaires. The history of class struggle shows us time and time again exclusions based on race, nationality, or national border only weakens the working class movement as a whole. This is why it's incredibly important not only to make demands concerning the workplace or industry, but also to have broader demands. This is a critique that we have received like often in our organizing, but we think, you know, standing in solidarity with Palestine is essential. Having broader demands also points us towards the future. Demands like nationalizing the energy sector won't be possible unless labor unions join in on the struggle. So I just want to reiterate one more time for those watching in Kansas City, we're having a 25 Now rally on March 8th with Workers Strike Back and University of Missouri Students and Workers United. I hope everyone in Kansas City can join us, and thank you so much for your time and solidarity, everybody.
All right, so we have one more struggle report, and I'm really excited to be introducing Raghav Kaushik. I think I first met him in the foyer in City Hall when it was full to the brim with hundreds of Indian American activists, and they were passing around Indian-style pizza, which if you've never had, you need to go out and have some because it's amazing. But they weren't just there to turn out for city council, which is already an impressive feat because they held those stupid meetings at 2 p.m. on a weekday to make sure that working class people can't go. But they made sure that the hundreds of people who turned out wouldn't have to leave early, that they would have all the snacks that they need to sit there and tell the Democrats exactly what they thought of them. And with that strategy, right, we were able to win not just, I think we spoke in the video about the historic ban on caste discrimination, but before that, actually, a repudiation of the racist Modi regime and their citizenship laws, which I think really were an international harbinger of sort of the move to the right and that we've seen, you know, all over the world. And now we're sort of seeing Modi and Trump buddying up yet again. And, you know, I remember at the time, the Democrats said, oh, well, this isn't a Seattle issue. And they were wrong then, and they are wrong today. And that's why we're really excited to have Raghav Kaushik speak to the importance of international solidarity in the fight against oppression.
I really like what Calvin said in his speech before about offensive fights and defensive fights. The theme of this conference has been to fight the rich. And to fight the rich, we do need to fight defensive fights. Like, when Trump is firing civil servants, we need to protest it. But that's not enough. We need to go beyond that. Higher minimum wage, Medicare for all, free public transit, ending caste discrimination, issues like that. We need to win concrete victories like that, material gains, starting with the local level and then going on to the national level. And, we have a great example of how to win such victories over the past decade, right here in Seattle. And in fact, I'm here to talk about precisely one of them. Exactly 2 years ago, February 21st, 2023, the Seattle City Council banned caste discrimination in the city. And Seattle became the first jurisdiction outside South Asia to do so. Media coverage of this was viral. The news just became viral. You can hear Shama talking about socialism and tax the rich and things like that in various Indian languages like Hindi and Marathi. The governor of the Indian state of Tamil Nadu, M.K. Stalin, tweeted his congratulations. It was so big. And that was incidentally probably the first time in history that someone named Stalin was congratulating a Trotskyist. Caste is a system of oppression that's hierarchical and based on birth, and it divides people into these rigid groups, with groups at the lower tiers facing severe oppression and even violence. And this, even though it's 2,000 years old, it continues to this day in India. And it's a fundamental fault line of Indian society, being a major factor behind the rise of the right wing. So it's not just some arcane, old, irrelevant issue, right? It's very current, very relevant even today. And caste exists not just in India, but it exists among the diaspora here. You know, I am a tech worker, I work at Microsoft, and I have seen caste play out myself in Microsoft. There were internal Microsoft emails, which were in fact published by the Washington Post a few years ago, where there were casteist comments being made by some employees against others who are caste oppressed, called Dalits, and questioning their intelligence, work ethics, and so on. And no one was ever held accountable for it. And there are many other examples like that. We collected them as part of our movement of caste discrimination that's present in the US. And the fact that it's so relevant today is what makes the victory significant. The opposition to our movement was bipartisan, and that's been a theme of all the talks today. We had the Hindu right wing, and like I said, caste is a real trigger point for the Hindu right wing. And that's a point that's often not very well understood, because the public image of the Hindu right wing is they are Islamophobic, which is true, but they're also casteist, right? And so, you know, when it comes to defending the billionaires, they try every method. So the Hindu right wing was majorly opposed to us. The Vishwa Hindu Parishad, which is one of the biggest, most prominent right-wing organizations in India, the US chapter, and they're closely aligned with the Narendra Modi administration. They opposed the ordinance. And the Democrats were not much better. And the clearest example of it was when the fight for caste went from Seattle to California, where the governor of California ultimately vetoed the bill unilaterally. It was a unilateral decision. There was no pressure from anyone. And I'll come to California in a bit more detail in a bit. But even in Seattle, right, it's not like the city council Democrats voted for us because of the kindness of their hearts. It took a strong movement and a lot of pressure to make them vote for it. Incidentally, the Modi administration, because of victories like the caste victory, they're rewarding our campaign by denying Shama a visa to visit her family in India. It's an act that's so outrageous that it's received considerable media attention in the past few weeks. Denial of visas is a favorite weapon of the Modi administration to crush dissent among the diaspora. There are plenty of Sikh Americans who get denied visas for being critical of the Indian government. It's even prompted the Human Rights Watch to issue a report. Like in the case of the caste issue, the Democrats are happy to play along, and they're just paving the way for it. Representative Adam Smith, who is a member of the American Sikh Caucus, has done nothing on this issue, right? Shame. You know what he's busy doing? He's busy supporting Israel in the genocidal frenzy. He's also very happy to describe anti-war voices as left-wing fascists. Yeah, that's actually true. You can Google that. He did do that. He's disgusting enough to do that. Anyway, we're going to be organizing a rally to protest against Adam Smith on connecting his support for Israel and his silence and complicity with the Modi administration and the denial of visas exactly 1 month from now. March 22nd, that's also a Saturday, and it's going to be at noon. There's flyers describing this event that are being circulated, so please show up and show your support. Back to the caste victory. Our coalition was broad, and this goes to the theme of internationalism that Emily stated. We had anti-caste groups, we had socialists, we had labor unions, we had other South Asian groups like Muslim and Sikh groups as well. There was a very broad coalition that was needed to put pressure on the city council Democrats to vote for us. And this reflected an understanding in the movement, and this goes to the worker strike back theme, right? That all oppressions are linked, and that the fight against them, therefore, should also be linked. One thing I do want to call out, and this was a point that has come up in earlier speeches as well, is about identity politics. And just to be clear what I mean and what I don't mean, right? The particular fight here was about what was against caste oppression, and caste is an identity marker. So we need to be clear that we're not saying that we shouldn't be fighting such things, fighting caste oppression, and the George Floyd protests were inspiring, great. But there are tendencies within movements where these identity-based markers tend to warp decision-making, and they affect movements badly. And those kinds of tendencies we have to be opposed to. And there were examples of that in the caste movement itself. For example, I'll just pick one example. There were anti-caste groups within our coalition who felt that we shouldn't have a movement-based offensive kind of an approach. They felt that we should talk to the city council members kind of one by one in back channel negotiations and kind of slowly nudge them to support what we want. We decided that kind of approach is not going to work. In fact, there was other parts of a movement where the principle was follow Dalit leadership, right? So if we had blindly taken that up and followed that, we wouldn't have built a strong movement. And who knows, we might even have lost, right? We might not have won. So that is the kind of identity politics that we have to guard against, and that we did guard against in the Seattle victory. Incidentally, I mentioned the California thing where Governor Newsom vetoed the bill. But it's interesting to look at what the background to that was. So after the Seattle victory, the movement spread. So there was a desire to fight caste oppression across the country. And California was the biggest example where that happened. What happened was that the organizers there kind of fell back to their back channel based approach. They didn't emphasize the movement too much. In fact, they went to the extent of saying that Kshama shouldn't be there because she's going to talk about socialism, and that might upset the Democrats who they were recruiting. And that might be too extreme, apparently. And that hurt the movement badly, right? That kind of approach, that kind of attitude hurt the movement. And it was an uphill fight. So even if we had built a strong movement, it would have taken a massive fight, but we would have given ourselves a much better chance to win. Instead, what the activists there actually did, their approach kind of paved the way for the governor to ultimately veto, right? So that's a massive lesson that we have from the caste fight. And that's something we need to keep in mind as we advance get into our future fights, including on the caste issue. Those are the main points that I wanted to make. But going back to what Calvin said, which I really liked, the victory against caste discrimination, like the one for Tax Amazon, like the one for 15 Now, were all examples of offensive approach. And it almost feels like we've had so many such victories. So no, this requires a lot of skill and a lot of dedication and commitment to that particular approach that results in this, because there are many failures too. And not just in California. I mentioned the California case, but I've actually seen failures in Seattle itself, and even Kshama has seen some of those, where a reluctance to use this approach resulted in defeats. So this approach is hard-learned and takes the kind of sophisticated analysis that Worker Strike Back brings to the picture. And that's what it's going to take to fight the rich. Solidarity.
Okay, we've almost made it to the very end. Thank you all so much for being here today. I just want to say real quickly that one of the answers to identity politics, of course, is to both fight for our common interests as workers, and of course against all forms of oppression, including racism, sexism, caste oppression, anti-trans prejudice. We must do both things. Quick announcement, there is a social here at the end of the event with pizza and soft drinks after our closing remarks, which will be coming up, and that will go from, well, the end of the event until 8 p.m. Tomorrow, the Worker Strike Back Conference is here starting at 10 a.m. If you have not gotten your schedule, you can still pick one up from downstairs when we go downstairs. And please, 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 clean up around yourself. There is no one here to clean up after you. Our final speaker for tonight, and we'll be providing our closing comments, is Willow Reeder. Willow is a public mental health worker in Boston, Massachusetts, and they are a member of Workers Strike Back and the Revolutionary Workers. And they are providing our closing remarks tonight. Thank you all for being here, and see you soon.
When we fight, when we fight, when we fight. Thank you so much to all of our speakers and to everyone who sacrificed your time to be here today. We had well over 200 people here in person, with another 6.5 thousand tuning in over live stream throughout the day. Yeah, so I'm Willow. I work as a therapist in a community mental health agency unionized with SEIU in the Boston area. I love the work that I do, and I love my clients, but I see firsthand every day the impact of this rotten capitalist system on mental health. And while many of my colleagues feel burnt out and demoralized by our extremely limited abilities to improve the lives of those that we serve, I am grateful for the clarity and hope provided through my membership in Workers Strike Back and Revolutionary Workers. It's important and entirely necessary that we are here together as working people, union and non-union, as forces on the left, to discuss the way forward to build a united, militant, working class movement to fight the rich and both their parties. People are increasingly drawing the conclusion that both parties are for big business and the rich, that our needs are diametrically opposed to theirs, and that we cannot reform the Democratic Party. That Donald Trump, while he may have won some people over with his promises to bring down inflation and end the war on Gaza, is ultimately beholden to the rich and going on the offensive against workers and youth, and is calling for ethnic cleansing in Gaza. Meanwhile, Bernie Sanders is trying to suck his former supporters back into the fold of the billionaire-backed Democratic Party by talking about Medicare for all after having squandered every opportunity to fight for it. AOC and the squad try to pose as leaders of the resistance to Trump. Labor leaders are promising to work with the Trump administration rather than leading the charge against his anti-worker and right-wing agenda. But in stark contrast, we are here, clear-eyed, discussing a way forward, and we need to make that count. We must oppose Trump and the right wing, but opposing Trump and the right wing is not enough. We need to build the kind of movement that can win historic victories for working people that clearly demonstrate the strategy needed. We need to launch bold campaigns to fight for expanded Medicare for all, social housing, free transit, a living wage, and an end to deportations of immigrants, war and occupation, and attacks on trans people and other oppressed communities. We need to unionize Amazon. And as someone who joined Workers Strike Back just this morning said, we need to kick Jeff Bezos in the proverbial teeth. We need to defeat Bezos, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, and all their billionaire cronies. While the Democrats move further and further to the right, including many Democrats in Congress joining in on Trump's attacks, we need to provide a clear alternative to overcome the divide and rule strategies of the ruling class. We need to build a new mass anti-war working class party, a party that includes Workers Strike Back, the Green Party, Abandon Harris, and other organizations. What's it going to take to build a new party for working people? And what kind of party do we need? We need a party that has a fighting strategy to win what workers need. Medicare for all, taxing Amazon and big business to fund social housing, free mass transit, ending all military funding for the Israeli state and the occupation of Gaza and the West Bank, unionizing Amazon in every workplace, and bringing down Trump, the billionaires, and both their parties. That is the program of our proposed Fight the Rich campaign. Free Palestine. We need a party that has fighting leadership, with a track record of building effective movements, of taking on big business, taking on the Democratic and Republican parties, and winning. We won't win by just running a lot of candidates for office, and we don't have the capacity to do that. We need to concentrate our forces to wage effective class struggle campaigns, which could include running a few strong leaders in key elections. But a working class party has to do more than run elections. We need a party that will lead mass movements, militant protest action, mass civil disobedience, coordinated mass strikes to take on the power of big business. We need a party that will disrupt business as usual and use every tool at our disposal to win our demands. We shouldn't see this as launching just another third party to give more choices on the ballot during elections. We need to bring together the forces of the working class and the left to build the kind of mass party that can push aside the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, the bosses, and ultimately their entire system. In 1854, the Republican Party, which at that time was a new radical anti-slavery party, was founded through a coming together of anti-slavery forces that had engaged in pitched battles against the expansion of slavery, including against major pro-slavery offenses like the Kansas-Nebraska Act. It was a coming together of those who had worked to build anti-slavery third parties in the previous decade, including the Liberty Party and the Free Soil Party, the abolitionist faction wing of the Whig Party, who correctly decided to abandon that party, just like working people are abandoning the Democratic and Republican parties today. We need that sort of coming together today, of the best fighters from the Green Party, of Abandon Harris, of the militant wing of the union movement, of principled socialists, of Workers Strike Back, revolutionary workers, and of the millions of working people that are not currently part of any organization or union. The anti-slavery Republican Party, when it was founded, didn't emerge out of thin air. It was born out of movements and concrete struggles. And that's what the Fight the Rich campaign and Workers Strike Back are all about. We need to take what we've discussed today and put it into action. Workers Strike Back is calling for a national day of action on March 22nd, protesting Congress members from both parties who have supported and fueled the genocide in Gaza and demanding an end to military funding of Israel. And we're proposing a follow-up organizing conference via Zoom in 3 months' time to discuss progress and next steps to fight the rich. Can I get a show of hands for who here is currently a member of Workers Strike Back? That's amazing. And who here has signed up today to become a Workers Strike Back member or can pledge to become a member before you leave this conference? Please go to one of the Workers Strike Back tables and sign up to become a member. Buy a copy of our pamphlet about how Shama Sawant and our movement won historic victories in Seattle, like the Amazon tax and the first major city $15 an hour minimum wage. Buy a copy of Revolutionary Worker, the magazine of Shama Sawant's socialist organization. If you're watching online, become a member of Workers Strike Back right now. You can go to workersstrikeback.org/join and sign up to help build this fighting organization. Thank you all so much for being part of this movement. I hope to see all of you back tomorrow for our Workers Strike Back convention, where we'll hear more about work happening around the country, discuss the Fight the Rich campaign and our priorities, and vote on democratic structures and leadership to build Workers Strike Back into the strongest possible fighting force with chapters around the country. If you're attending tomorrow, please bring back your lanyard and your name tag with you to help you streamline things. And we invite everyone here to stay and join us for a social in the Great Hall downstairs to continue these important conversations informally. Real quick, who's our enemy? The rich. Who's our enemy? The rich. Thank you in solidarity.
That's a wrap, and we don't have this room anymore, so please head downstairs to the Great Hall where we've got pizza and soft drinks.